My mother was a seamstress, and I used to watch her sewing all the time, doing lace applique work for her clients. So I guess as a kid, I was always into sewing a little bit, into crafts. I know I used to do some embroidery work and some sewing. And then when I took a weaving class, I don't know, I guess I just fell in love with it. I took that first backstrap weaving class, and I thought, someday I want to learn how to do a floor loom. And when I eventually did, I really enjoyed it. I first started weaving back in the 1970s. I took a class at Bishop Museum. And then years later, I went to Linikona, the Museum of Art School, and learned to weave from Jenny Matsuda, and then Dawn Kadota, and Barbara Eichner. Yeah, when I first started out weaving, it was really just a hobby, just because I didn't have time. And when I moved to Waimea, I had more time because I was winding down my career. So then it became kind of this thing where I now weave like 4 to 6 hours every day. I started to take classes. I went to the mainland, took classes at the weaving school in Coopville. I went to Vavstuga in Massachusetts. I took classes at Convergence. I learned to weave velvet. I learned to weave with metal. I learned all kinds of weaving techniques, different patterns, just a whole host of things. And of course, I took all the workshops here that the Handweavers Hui offers. And then I just started to weave a lot. And as I started to weave, I accumulated all these pieces. And it was like, what am I going to do with it all? So I started to sell them around 2010. So I have an annual sale every year. And I sell my pieces to a list of people here in Waimea that know me and like to buy them. I like to weave beautiful and functional items. I'm not someone who weaves art pieces. So I weave a lot of silk scarves and shawls. I weave placemats, rugs, napkins, and I weave a lot of dish towels. I'm kind of known for my dish towels. They're woven of cotton, they tend to be colorful, they're very absorbent and soft, and people have come to know me for them. I probably weave over 100 of them a year and usually sell out every year. For weavers, dish towels are a nice little piece to weave because you can try out different patterns, different colors, and oftentimes I'll see something in a magazine and I think, oh, let me see how this looks. And then I'll take that and take it to silk and make a scarf or a shawl. So dish towels are kind of a nice way to sample different things. My favorite fiber to weave with is silk. I like the luster. I like the hand of the cloth that it produces. It just feels good when you're setting up the loom because it's silky. And despite the fact that the threads are really fine oftentimes, they don't break. Silk is so strong, and rarely do I ever get a silk thread that breaks on the loom. And I love the colors that when you dye silk, it just produces great colors. In 2017, I traveled to Australia, and part of my trip there was to study with the late Kay Faulkner. She was a pretty famous weaver in Australia. So I spent a week with her in her home, in her studio, and I learned to weave on a draw loom. And a draw loom is different from a regular, what we call a jack loom. The draw loom produces cloth that's called damask. And the damask cloth has a warp-faced pattern that you weave with a weft-face background. So it's usually a 2-color weave, and most people do images like animals or flowers or different kinds of designs for tablecloths and a lot of upholstery fabric or wall hangings. I tend to do geometric patterns. I find patterns that I like. When I'm traveling, I might see a pattern or a design in a window or a door and take a photo, and then I translate it to graph paper, and I weave that image onto my cloth. So it's a very specific kind of loom. There are, pattern units as well as ground weave units. It's kind of a complicated weave, but it's really fun. It's very slow because I can only do maybe a couple of inches in a half an hour. But it's a very satisfying kind of weaving pattern or weaving device. because I can play with different images. The only way you could get those same images on a regular loom or a jack loom is to pick up threads one by one to do them. So this offers you an opportunity to do something at a faster rate, I guess. And most people design for a draw loom or even regular looms with computers. And I'm kind of a Luddite in the fact that I just don't use computers. I just do everything by hand on graph paper, and it seems to work. Sometimes I like to embellish cloth. I use sashiko stitching. I've developed a way of weaving beads or pearls into cloth. So that's kind of fun, just to create different textures in silk scarves and shawls. People seem to really like that little bit of bling in their garments. Teaching for the Handweavers Hui has been a really great joy for me. I didn't know that I'd like it, but when we started our studio several years ago, I decided to teach basic floor loom weaving, and I really enjoy it because it's just really great to see students' eyes open up and they kind of get it, and all of a sudden they're weaving away and they're just having a great time. Because weaving is a very enjoyable craft because you're producing something that's beautiful and it's functional. As I tell my students, weaving has endless possibilities. You can take the same weave structure, plain weave, which is just over and under, over and under. 75% of what I weave is plain weave. But if you change the colors or the thickness of the yarn that you're using, texture of the yarn that you're using, you've created a whole new piece of cloth. So the possibilities are really endless. I don't usually weave patterns and structures. When students ask me about certain structures and patterns, I go, I'm the worst person to ask because I don't understand them all. I can weave them from a pattern book. I just like to play. I like to just, take inspiration from the yarns that I have in front of me, the colors, the textures, and I put them on the loom. And that's how I create cloth. I guess you could say I'm a small production weaver because I produce things and then I sell them. But it's a very enjoyable thing. And interestingly, I love to set up the loom. A lot of people find it really daunting to deal with hundreds of threads and putting them in the right place in the right order. I really like that. I like that more than the weaving part. So when I'm weaving, I'm kind of bored. And so I listen to a lot of books while I'm weaving. Weaving's a craft that mankind has been doing for thousands of years. Somebody had to create string first, and then they started to loop it or make fishnets or baskets with these threads. So weaving is a way of producing a bigger piece, a piece of cloth that can then be used for clothing or household goods. And weaving was a necessary craft thousands of years ago because there was no other way except for animal skins to cover yourself. Looms are just a way of holding those threads so that you can interlace them. Looms can be very simple or they can be really complicated. I guess in a way you have to be a little OCD to be a weaver because you've got to make sure everything lines up and it's perfectly tensioned. But at the same time, weaving allows you a lot of creativity because of the threads you're using, the colors you're using, and you can create all kinds of images, patterns, looks, and weaving is something we just take for granted because we buy our clothing and household goods, but you can create your own, and it's really fun to do that.